This is AA4FL for Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta operating today out of Hawthorne, Florida, having a group roundtable discussion here about potential trips or organization to in contest activities that one might participate in. We're going to be making a YouTube video on this, distribute it to the public. You don't have to be a medical amateur radio council member to participate. Healthcarehams.org. I think you'll find today's discussion fascinating, and will be having our guests, other guests that have attended the recent meeting of the International Amateur Radio Exhibition in Friedrichshafen, Germany, on board with us. So what do we do? I mean, we're in a connected world, and certainly COVID brought out the connected world aspect and limited personal live interaction, but now we're there. We can use that interaction in live meetings and events to enjoy ourselves. And that really cements the on-the-air friendship, very meaningful. And Marco activities tend to sync the solar cycle with the life cycle, so they don't exist in a vacuum. We know that individuals have families, and the activities that we plan, we try to encourage all family members to attend and make a broad enough uh, activity list to give options. I think you'll find that fascinating as you hear about this recent trip. DX vacations are something that we've done before and can do again. And we kind of hyphenate the DX vacations and DxCation. And DxCations or DxCation, I believe we own I have the .org. And one of our members, ON4PG, who was instrumental in having us come to Europe, has expressed an interest in increasing the visibility of that and starting a website for it and helping to foster our meetings and coordinate. Has connections that allow it to be easier to consume and participate. But there's also other events. It doesn't have to be a trip to Europe. When we're here in the United States, there's AmFest, certainly. Look at everything that's going on in amateur radio. What's popular right now? Parks on the Air, Summits on the Air. Those are two easy to do activities that can be done regionally or nationally. We do have a club call. Certainly it'd be nice to do that using the Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta call. We can work out the logistics for that. Our trustees with us today, KM2M. But what about VUCC satellite and 6 meters? Now, people do like rare grid squares. It's easy to take a ICOM 7300 in the field, put it on 20 meters, go to a grid square that's a little on the more rare side. And even the antennas now, I mean, you've got hex beams that are easy to set up and fairly portable. So we encourage that as a potential activity. There's certainly the annual meetings and Hamfest. We're present at most of the major Hamfests on the East Coast, and hopefully at some point we will be on the West Coast, at least as guests. And what about contests? And in both in the USA and DX locations, we're certainly capable of doing that. We will show an example of that being done in St. Lucia. KM2M is with us today, and he was on that trip as well. And Dave is our trustee, FCC trustee for the Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta, KM2M. Thank you, Dave, for being there and all that you do. And I'm checking in N3IM, who's with us here today, Keith. Conditions are on the poor side here at 20 meters, it appears. So we do have a Zoom simulcast for our American members. But what about the CQ Worldwide contests? And those are major events, and certainly groups participate in that. Sideband, CW. There's dates coming up in the fall. Maybe it's too late to plan for that, but in subsequent years, we've participated in CQ Worldwide phone before with an entry at J68MD in St. Lucia. There's also lighthouses and islands on the air. These are all activities that we could choose as a group to participate in. Some of them can be quite enjoyable for spouses, whether with a big group, you rotate your radio time, allows you to recreate and have family time as well. There's special events. We did one for Warren Brown, recognizing his 100th trip grandson as he passed away. And that was a fascinating and very popular event. All kinds of QSL card requests for Warren's, and it's publicity for the club. Honored Warren, who is tirelessly working for doing activities for the Medical Amateur Radio Council, doing this net for in the ether for 25 years. Fascinating person and a wonderful way to recognize them. So let me pause one for any additional check-ins on 20 meters. I do have M3IM already checked in, but any other check-ins, make your call to Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. Okay, none heard as of right now. So what are some of the possibilities for trips? Well, when we have annual meetings every other year, they're in Xenia, in the Dayton Xenia area, and every other year, on alternate years, by the choice of the president. The year that I was president, we did a fly-in meeting, and I'm not the first one to do a fly-in meeting. This one was done at the Tampa airport, but the way to attract others in the families is to have it in tandem with a special activity. And the particular activity in Tampa was 4 days at the Tampa airport, having business and pleasure both. And some individuals flew in just for that meeting. They couldn't stay for the optional 1 week follow-up meeting, which was a trip on in a cruise ship going down to the Caribbean and operating radio. It was a very successful one. We started in the Dali Museum in St. Petersburg. What's interesting with the Dali Museum, being that we're a group of individuals that are interested in medical topics, we arranged for a docent who was a psychologist to lead the tour. He was interpreting Dali's paintings, and as you can imagine, that was eminently interesting because Dali was a fascinating person who expressed his artwork in very creative ways. So that worked out well enough and attractive enough that we even had a member come from Japan, JA0BXP, and his spouse came in for the meeting. It was a big group. We had Carnival Cruise Line. It was a radioactive cruise. It was a week-long cruise that followed the meeting at the Tampa Marriott, flying into the airport. And a big group, some that had not been very active in Marco up to that time, some that had been leaders for years. And we got treated extremely well, and everyone, spouses included, had a wonderful time. So the DX meetings can have a DxCation component, the annual meetings, excuse me. And the particular meeting in 2019 is a little melancholy in a way, because two of the participants have passed away recently. Chip's wife, Terry Keister, passed away a few years ago. And while we were on the trip in Germany 3 weeks ago, Dave Fox, NN4DF, passed away. Now, Dave was a professor at the University of Florida who's a ham, and became aware of the trip, and he's not a Marco member, he's not medical, he's a forestry professor. And he and his wife came along and had a wonderful time. So just to show you that you don't have to be in the medical profession to enjoy yourself in the Medical Amateur Radio Council and Healthcare Hams, we encourage you to participate. We even arranged for a private dinner following the tour, a private dinner and a tour of the kitchen. And the tour of the kitchen was extremely interesting. And having a private dinner where they created plates just for us and explained, you got a chance to see the food that was going to be prepared and got to partake in it, and both done in a very classy way. It was very impressive and very enjoyable for all those in attendance that participated. Of course, JA0BXP and his wife, Etsu. Etsu's invited us to come to Japan if we'd like to have a Japan trip as well. And he's been a Marco member for over 40 years. He started during his residency program in the US. And we also got a chance to operate radio. Before I start that aspect of this trip, and this was significant enough that it made the cover of QST in November, I think it was 2021, even though it was a 2019 trip, it was the cover story for QST that month. So if there's anybody else, I hope you're finding this roundtable discussion interesting on 20 meters. So are there any other stations that would like to check in and participate? Make your call to Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. Okay, none at this time. We started in Mexico on the first stop of 4 stops on the Carnival ship, but we didn't operate amateur radio in Mexico. The next stop was Belize. And we operated in Belize as V31D, of course, vacation style. We got off the boat, took a drive over to a location we had rented, and set up operations. And then what we did, since there were 3 different operating stops, it allowed individuals on the cruise to balance family. Also, hang on a second. John, I'll do the mute here. Okay, so we started in Belize, and out of the trip in Belize, there were 6 of us that were radio operators. And we were with the former mayor, I think the current mayor at the time, of Belize City. And it was her residence. She made arrangements to have one of her rental residences for us to use. We had CW operation, we had FT8 operation. We tried to do some voice. It was a very noisy area, as it often is when you get out in foreign countries. You try to do voice with low power, and the CW was successful. And we had a few very sharp CW ops, including Bob. And for gosh, I having what I said was senior moments here, and I'll remember it in just a minute, but also Etsu is a CW op. And of course, all of us operate CW, but they were enjoying that immensely. And this is Marie, who also had one of our guests, which was the daughter of a member who is a ham. She was operating CW. Marie was from V31D, and we're on a balcony over the water. And when you get in a location like that, it's just fascinating to look out over the Gulf in this particular case, and be able to operate and enjoy it as DX. And we certainly created the pilots. Next stop was Rotan in Honduras. We were HQ9D, similar. We had a group, some of them were different operators like the first group, and we went off to Rotan, set up our station location, which was a 2-story building, and we were using a yoga. It was actually a 3-story building. We were using a yoga retreat for operating. We were able to hang a dipole right out the window there towards the water. The local owners are more than willing to help. You get set up, you operate. This is, of course, one day because you're on a cruise. So that's not ideal in that particular fashion. You're only doing 5 to 6, 7 hours of operating because you need to get back on the cruise ship. But the views are worth it. Oh my gosh, how beautiful that trip was. You would just look out of your out off of your balcony where you're operating. You'd see is open Gulf, open blue water, palm trees. Just an exciting time. Hopefully some of you are going to healthcarehams.org, because if you do, when you click on the post, you'll be able to get the link to the visuals. You'll be seeing the visual description of the audio description that I'm giving. We'll give you guys a minute to go there. Healthcarehams.org. Again, look for posts. There's a link, open it up. You'll be able to enjoy it. Now, the next stop on our cruise was different. Yes, we had time limitations, but we had a major DX location station to use. So connections that one makes in ham radio fests, it's important to participate live. We met a group from the Cayman Islands that were at the Orlando DxCation, and Andrew Eden, ZF1 EJ, allowed us to come and use his station. It's also the DX station for the Cayman Islands. He has one in his house, one house in his yard. And he has such a fascinating antenna farm. He was actually, his antenna farm was the cover photo for QST. And unfortunately, Dave Fox had just recently passed away. He was on that trip. And in a way, I have a warm feeling knowing that he and his wife got to enjoy themselves on a special vacation to share with friends. And I'm glad, even though he was in his early 60s at the time, that he didn't wait. He got to participate that before he retired. He had since retired when he passed away. But operating there, you not only got all these Yagis, multiple towers, and he works on every frequency. And he's even down on the ones in the medium wave or low frequency bands, the experimental frequencies. And he set up for CW and set up for phone, and we brought along some FT8 equipment. And, we brought Mike K9AJ, who's a member, who's an excellent CW operator. He was just putting out that key and making numerous contacts on the Yagi that we had available, not having to rely on 100 watts and a dipole. Marie, who was with Chuck again, the Lins, they were operating 10-meter phone. They were racking up the contacts as well, because there were multiple towers, so we could be on simultaneously. It's really a special way to do it. So you can find DX locations that have stations. I'm sure many of you are aware of that. The next trip to the Cayman Islands, anybody interested to join me, I'd like to plan one. You can fly there and use the station and have a week's vacation there on, I think it's 9 Mile Beach there, Cayman. I'm sure my wife would be more than willing to go, with many of your spouses, whether they be male or female spouses, would be willing to go there. It's an easy flight from the United States, and something enjoyable to do. And before we go into our next operation in St. Lucia, which was the CQ Worldwide in 2019, I'm going to pause one here for any additional check-ins on 20 meters. This is Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta Fly D AA4 FL, the mic operating out of Hawthorne, Florida. Do we have any questions or late check-ins on the 20-meter side? Make your call this time to Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. Yeah, it's a shame propagation is so poor. Fortunately, we have the Zoom simulcast. Do we have any questions or comments so far on the Zoom side? I'll pause one. Go ahead and make your virtual call to Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta.
Comment, Jay.
Okay, we've got N5RTF for the question. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, this is N5RTF. I just wanted to point out that for almost all of us, I guess, that was the last trip before COVID. COVID appeared in New Orleans as early as Halloween in 2019, and that was just 6 months after this trip. And of course, everything changed and everything was locked down for years afterwards. So that was a particularly special trip when you think about that as well.
Thank you, Chip. N5RTF, Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. And that's absolutely true. And we tried to plan some other trips, even after the first wave of COVID broke, but it got to be logistically too complicated to do. We might pick that one up again. Dave Can2M went through a lot of effort to plan a trip to St. Martin. We were planning on going to St. Martin, Dutch and French, and go over to Aguilla and St. Bart's as well. You can imagine with 3 ferry rides during the COVID era, logistics that would have been impossible. We had to give that one up in 2021, perhaps to pick that one up in the future, because how many opportunities do you have to do 4 DX locations in one trip? And of course, not everybody can go for 3 weeks. You can pick a particular segment of the trip and do that. We get rentals. We're going to talk about the one we did in St. Lucia now with J68MD, which is Dave's call. Dave had been to St. Lucia before. You have to be twice to St. Lucia to get a call. They issued one for Dave here for us to use. So when you go to St. Lucia, the island has got a north side, which a lot of the resorts are, the bigger resorts, and then it's got a southern side that's very mountainous. And you've got the pitons, the mountains that the country is named, their flag, it's on their flag, Ray the Petit Piton. And you can see those peaks once again on their flag. But the north side is visited more often. The south, not as much, but there is a rental down there that's got amateur radio. Fascinating, wonderful person, J68, H7. I'm sure you've worked, many of you worked Bill before, excuse me, on the air. And he's quite active from St. Lucia, as well as some of the other local hams that participated with us. So when you go to a resort like that, Bill's QTH, you get a house that's a prime location for enjoyment and not a touristy area. And you also get a fully equipped first-class station, world-class station, and you can have a cook, and you can have drivers. And you have a true unimpeded vacation, where it's all joy. Well, two of us went in, Bob and I went into the, again, calls us escaping me right now, and for, Robert, it's in his name. Excuse me, pause one. Well, we went to a peak called Signal Peak, and we climbed up to Signal Peak and had never been activated for radio. Now, they weren't really doing SOTAs, the summits on the air at the time. When we did it, Bob did CW, I did satellite from up there. The walk, it wasn't too rough. What was interesting is from Signal Peak, and the reason why it's called Signal Peak, not because the US Army used it in World War II, they did, but back in the 1700s, I suppose, 1800s, probably 1700s, the British used Signal Peak to signal when the French were approaching Martinique, and you can actually see Martinique quite well from Signal Peak. That was an enjoyable hike and day. And on the way back down, we got a chance to also go to a fort that they had there, do some more satellite operations with some of the local hams. Now, being that families were along, we had 5 couples on this trip, 3 that were in the main house, and 2 couples that were in a separate rental property. And that island's got a lot to enjoy. There's waterfalls, botanical gardens. There's a volcano, a drive-up volcano. I mean, you got sulfur coming out of the ground. It's not like a peak. And the cook, you've got local fish, local food. You should get it from the market that day. Decide what you want. You have it made for you. And the women, the spouses that were women, really ate it up. And not, some of them were hams too. I mean, women are amateur radio operators as well. Hey, let's do it. Can we pause one? Grab a comment. Okay, we'll pick up the discussion here. We had our current treasurer, Diane Rodman, was on the trip, and our current membership committee member, Alana Condor, K4AAC, was on the trip. And we had others that were not hams as well, including my wife. And this was a trip that you did not need to be an amateur radio operator to enjoy. But during the week, of course, we had the ham radio activity. On the weekend, we had contest activity. It was CQ Worldwide. Bob and I also made a side trip. We had met Franz, J69DS, who's also a friend of Bill's. And Franz was originally from the Netherlands. His father moved to Martinique was a civil engineer to work on the port. When he was 3 years old, he came to St. Lucia to work on the port, never left. He married a local woman who is a caterer and a cook. And I tell you what, they had us come up to their house in the mountains of northern St. Lucia and just spoiled us brought. She cooked for us, showed us her garden. It's just, she sent us home with chocolate sticks, showed us how they roll cocoa. The talents that this woman had are hard to describe. And the views from up there were absolutely beautiful. So we did a pre-trip because, 10 days is a lot of time. Not everybody can take 10 days off. Bob and I could. And we went for 3 days ahead of time, followed by 7 days for the rest of the team join us. And the locals, and I know Dave was with me, came to them. They showed us how they harvest cashews and actually roasted them for us in the field. So you learned a lot about St. Lucia, as well as operated amateur radio, and made a lot of new friends that we talked to often to this day. It was absolutely wonderful trip. KN2M, Dave, you're still with us, would you like to tell us some about your experience on that trip? Oh,
You summed it up beautifully. There's far more detail than I could have imagined. I do remember the contest very well. My wife and I had been to St. Lucia previously. As you mentioned, we were aware of the geography. He's been around the island before, and he felt very much at home there. It was quite nice. I still maintain, as you say, contact with Franz from time to time. Franz is very good friends with a local ham here that made yearly trips to J6 rather. So I do have knowledge of Franz and his family's activities there in St. Lucia. It was a marvelous trip. An excellent time. I did have a beautiful conversation with Bill during Xenia, and he is absolutely waiting for us to come back and take over the station again, Jay. KN2M over.
okay, KN2M, AA4FL, the Mike Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta for ID purposes. The Grand Rounds on the Internet, the Medical Amateur Radio Council, open to all amateurs. And you don't have to be a Medical Amateur Radio Council to participate in our trips member or to participate in our nets or our roundtable discussion here. And as Dave just mentioned, he saw Bill down at the Xenia, and Bill's looking forward to our return trip. So there's three rooms in this particular rental, but he has other rentals nearby. As I said before, we had 3 couples in his main rental and 2 couples in a nearby rental. I'd go in a heartbeat too. So if anyone is interested in that particular trip, please contact me at QRZ address AA4FL. We can talk about setting that up as a family trip, perhaps as a contest trip as well. Bill's made enhancements even since we've been there. He's built out the station to be close to the antennas, away from the bedroom. I don't know how Dave and Diane got much sleep because we were operating outside the bedroom, but it was an enjoyable time regardless. And they're both amateur radio operators. I don't think a little bit of QSOs bothered them. I can't speak for you, Dave, but we could hear it too because our room is fairly close to it. But being that he's up close to the shack now, shack is now close to the antennas, he's adding satellite capability. And so far, the satellite operation there had been portable antennas, but soon you'll have a computer-controlled satellite station. Interesting enough, Dave, when I was walking through the flea market area of Xenia with my hat on that said AA4FL, I had 2 hams say, "Oh, it's St. Lucia J," and they had been to Bill's place and they operated satellite from there. And they thanked me for being one of the first stations to be satellite active there. But so that's another possibility if you'd like to learn it or operate it, as well as HF. You can do satellite, you can do 6 meters. Very attractive from St. Lucia. It's a wonderful trip. I encourage those of you that are listening today or hearing it on the YouTube video, if you're a Marco member or not. If that's something you might find interesting, again, please contact me at my email address, and we will start planning another trip. We have to plan these things out a little bit in advance, at least 6 months in advance, to make sure the logistics and licensing. But Franz J69DS actually did all the licensing for us. He walked it into the offices. We really didn't have to do much. It was just great friends that we made. As Dave said, we still are in contact with them, see them, we talk to them often, and stress the reality that going back there a second time would certainly not to be diminished. It's that worthwhile of a destination. So is there anybody that's on 20 meters that would be interested in something like that? You can certainly email me at my QRZ address, but I'll pause one for you to give a call. This is AA4FL. Okay, no one on 20 meters, everybody on Zoom, just please go ahead and email me. So the trip, the recent trip in 2025, and of course we've had to pause because of COVID, and actually this trip, COVID struck us at the end, so, but not in the same way that was before. I mean, I've been in Europe when COVID, you got COVID, it meant you had to stay until you tested negative before you get on a plane. Here it's not like that anymore, but we've always wanted to go to the International Amateur Radio Exhibition in Germany, and it gave a group of us that were interested a chance to do so. And it was time again for a Marco trip, time to get on an airplane and fly over. So when you go on a trip like this, and when we plan one, we try to do it in waves. So in this particular case, the carrot for my wife was a Viking River cruise. She's always wanted to do one. That got her to go along for the amateur radio aspects of it. And I've always wanted to spend time in Budapest. And then this boat ended in Budapest, gave us a chance to stay on for an extended stay. At the beginning, I'd never been to Switzerland for anything more than a quick visit. Gave us a chance to spend some time in Zurich and preview what we might like to do on future vacations in our family. So for those of you that like to travel or in a position to travel, realize we try to stripe the trip, give you options. If you can only take a week off from work, that's fine. Go for the main event of the trip. If you can afford to take more time, and I don't mean financial afford, if you have the luxury of time on your hands, if you're retired and work is not an issue, then join us on the pre-trip meeting and the post-trip meeting. In this particular case, the pre-trip meeting again was Zurich, which is a very beautiful city to fly into. And we'll talk about that here momentarily. So when we got to Zurich, the one negative of Europe on this trip is very hot. We came from Florida and we brought the heat with us. We're talking temperatures in the mid to high 90s, as high as 96 degrees in Europe. You know, that's problematic. I mean, we expected warmth, but not that warm. I think as soon as the Florida crowd left, it dropped 20 degrees. Not that we were doing that much warmer here, cooler here in the United States with a heat dome in the Northeast. But the kids were enjoying the river there in Zurich. They were lining up on the railings of the river, their bathing suits and diving in as they're walking around Zurich. So they had a method for getting out of the heat. We also had a beautiful hotel, great views. We were able to walk around Zurich. We were right next to the train station. So flying in, we just trained over to our hotel, which was right next to the bus station. So when we took bus trips, all we had to do was walk out our door and get on the bus. It was a perfect location for that. Plus, we had the beauty of downtown Zurich. When we talk about beauty, we're fortunate at W1 HMM Harry here is with us today. And Harry's spouse is a professional artist as well as an OBGYN. And the beauty was recorded and by all of us in photographs, and was interpreted through the eyes of Debbie Mueller, who would paint. We would go to a destination, she'd bring out the easel. And there's a little story about the Swiss Alps as we got into the Alps and took a bus trip. And Debbie took out her easel and started to paint. There was just such beauty to paint. She was able to capture some of the mountains. Of course, the adventurers in the world, they don't limit themselves to the ground. They get up and parasail off the peaks of these mountains. See them everywhere in Europe. They recreate that way. But the beautiful painting. So the story or the interesting happening is here we are in the mountains. We come back into Zurich and we have dinner that night at a restaurant. And during dinner, the lady at the next table was extremely nice. She started talking to us, and she didn't recognize Debbie at the time. She heard us talking about the painting, and she immediately recognized she was in the same place that day. She saw Debbie painting, and she had a photograph of Debbie painting. They started to exchange photos, and it was fascinating. Who in the world would have thought from the Swiss Alps back to Zurich, we would have had a direct connection to someone that had attended the same event that day. And Debbie continued to paint. There's Debbie. if you're coming in on Zoom, Debbie's here with us today. It was a very enjoyable, fascinating aspect to the trip. And, Debbie really took us to places of beauty. So we got to ride along as she found the perfect spot to paint and enjoy it in person as well, through our own eyes and experiences. Yeah, it was a fun time with you, Debbie. Thank you for taking the time off from still working as an OBGYN. And I know sacrificing to get away. It's always heck when you get back and it's payback time. when you get back to the United States, you get killed and slammed before you take a trip as a health professional. And they slam you even greater when you get back. So thank you, Debbie. We went from Zurich and we traveled on a bus, and Debbie made the arrangements for us to travel to Friedrichshafen, Germany. So where we were at Zurich is not that far, really, just about 2 or 3 hours from the location of the meeting in Germany. What was interesting on the southern part of Switzerland, the northern part of Switzerland, the southern part of Germany, there's a lake, a very large lake called Lake Constance. And we were able to travel with the arrangements Debbie made to Friedrichshafen by bus. And what we didn't anticipate or know is that they would actually ferry us across the lake. So you can imagine, here we are, a group of amateur radio operators, and going to an amateur radio meeting, enjoying Switzerland, enjoying the beauty of the Swiss Alps. And now we get introduced to this beautiful lake area of Germany, with the initial approach being by bus going across the lake. And Lannis, who's with us, KA9 PUP, Lannis is with us today. She made arrangements for the evening for us from arriving in Switzerland to go to a fish restaurant. I don't want to monopolize the microphone. We've got Stuart and Lannis here with us. Perhaps you'd like to tell us about those arrangements and what it meant to you to be in Lake Constance, because you were in that area, I believe, before we ever approached. I'm going to turn the microphone, the Zoom over to you, audio over to you guys.
Hi, this is Lannis, KA9 PUP. It was a very enjoyable week that we had prior to joining everyone at Friedrichshafen. Lake Constance is beautiful. It's the largest lake in Germany and one of the largest in Europe. And it's a well-kept secret. We were there for about 8 days initially, solely because my cousin had been there and told us about it and thought we would enjoy it. And although it was really hot, we did see a lot there. There are islands in the lake that you can visit, beautiful gardens, medieval towns, and you get to these places by taking the ferry. So that was very convenient. And towards the end, we then made our way by ferry to Friedrichshafen and joined the group. That evening, we were all together and we went to a local fish restaurant called Fischstube Restaurant. And had fish from Lake Constance. Was really a wonderful place to dine together. And after leaving Friedrichshafen, we had to make our way to Regensburg, where we were supposed to meet the Viking boat Atla. Unfortunately, the river was quite low there, so we had rented a bus from Friedrichshafen to Regensburg, which was about a 4-hour ride, which went very fast with one nice break in between. And then when we got to Regensburg, Viking cruise people had another bus or vans that would take all of us to the ship. And so it was all organized very well, very enjoyable. The week on the Danube is unforgettable, beautiful. We all did different side trips from there that Viking offers, and hope we get to do it again sometime.
That about sums it up. And I want to thank Lannis because she was the mastermind travel planner.
WA9ZPL at the microphone there with his wife Lannis operating as under his control. Ka9 PUP. Well, it it was certainly pleasurable and spending time with you. And we had spent time together in Orlando at DxCation. It certainly cemented the friendship. And we have a lot of similar interests. And we chose some of the same excursions. And you will hear from others as well. Now, Barry, WB1FFI is here with us today too, Barry. But you had the pleasure of having family in Berlin that drove down. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your experiences there, Barry? I'm going to turn the mic over to you, WB1FFI, coming in through soon.
Yes, my wife has a nephew that lives in the Berlin area, so he and his wife came down for one of the days, and we were able to share 2 meals together. We had lunch on the lake, and he joined us for dinner with our large group. And it was also helpful having a German-speaking person when you have to order food in Germany. It certainly helps. And we had a really fun visit, very enjoyable, just enhanced our I think the group enjoyed his company at dinner that night. So yeah, and again, I'll extend a big thank you to Lannis and Debbie Miller, just for taking care of a lot of the extra travel considerations that are not that easy to make when you're in the United States. So it really saved us a lot of work. It's certainly a lot easier to write a check than to actually schedule these appointments. So a royal thank you for that. So I'll send it back to you, Jay. AA4FL from WB1.
Well, thank you, Barry. WB1FFI. Now, this is AA4FL, the mic, Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta, Grand Rounds in the Air, operating out of Hawthorne, Florida. Do we have any comments or questions on 20 meters or late check-ins? Make your call to Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. Okay, nothing heard on 20 meters, and the poor propagation as of recent is disappointing. Yes, Lannis made the arrangements for that beautiful bus trip to Regensburg too. It's a shame that Regensburg couldn't put in there, but we still got to visit the city. Fascinating city. But we spent about 2.5 days, 3 days in Friedrichshafen first, and got to the ham radio meeting. So comparable in a way to Xenia. Probably the facility is a little bit nicer than the Greene County Fairgrounds in Xenia, Ohio. Even nicer than Orlando. We got to realize that Friedrichshafen is a destination that is a holiday destination for a lot of Germans as well, and also a lot of industry. But during World War II, it was a target of industry. The Zeppelin Museum being there, the Zeppelin hangars being there at the time, as well as some of the Messerschmitts were produced there, the 129s. So they were heavily bombed, and the city had been rebuilt. And you're dealing with this beautiful lake here. But when you go on the ham radio side, you've got the exhibition halls. And unlike Xenia, where you have them spread out, there's only one exhibit hall. So there aren't as many exhibits. Flea market areas inside, similar to what you would see here in the United States on the outside in terms of the content. So the ARL was well represented. And we did get a chance, as Barry mentioned earlier, during his president's comments, to meet the president of the ARL and the CEO of the ARL. And Barry had also mentioned that we got to network with the Qatar Imagery Society, as well as many others. I was very fortunate to run into 2 hams that I traveled to T33A, Bonama Island, with in 2013. There were 3 Germans that were on that trip with us. Of course, they made fun of the beer that we drink, but I don't even like the beer that we drink. I don't drink it much. It was nice to be in Germany for some other beer, but Gerd, the DJ6 EW perhaps, but Axel, can't remember his call right now, but he's actually on a lot of the expeditions currently. Gerd was 85 years old. as of now. So when he went on that trip to Bonneville, you're already 73, and if you look at a photograph of Gerd, you wouldn't recognize him as an 85-year-old for sure. His activity level and his intellectual acuity is still as sharp as ever. So that was a pleasure to see him. Meeting Barry's family was enjoyable. The fish restaurant was phenomenal because here you are in an area that's then has found a jewel that's frequented by the locals. And this is fish right out of the lake. And when you see the locals eating somewhere, you know you're in a good place. The Flex Radio was there, had a chance to interact. What was nice about having Flex Radio there, they worked with 403A from Montenegro. Montenegro, they had a booth. So you got to see some of the products that they developed for Flex, as well as their own products. And on the spouse end, or the non-ham excursions, or the ham excursions that were not ham radio related, even though Friedrichshafen was bombed during World War II and didn't have that old German feel, there were plenty of hamlets in the areas that were. When it's mentioned, they're able to take ferries places. I think Lindau was one of the ones they went to. A nice island or peninsula with a lighthouse. They enjoyed themselves. On that ham radio exhibit side, Stuart and I were talking about this recently. WA9ZPL. In amateur radio, it's nice to encourage young people to get involved because they might be able to find job connections. They must do that with a more active sense in Germany. They actually had a ham radio job wall at the Hamfest where they listed jobs. And there were currently 12 jobs listed there. I was able to take a photograph and document that others that might be interested. And we finally did get to Regensburg after having to be bused from Austria. We knew ahead of time that sometimes the water levels in the Danube are not high enough for a Viking ship. And this particular surprised us slightly because it was early in the season. Usually it's more late July into August. And as we started to visit Regensburg and we drove back there, you could see why there wasn't a lot of water in the river. In doing so, it was still worth the visit. It's a city that dates back to Roman times. And a lot of the Danube River was sort of the demarcation between the Roman Empire and what they had in there, the ancient Germans. Trying to lose words here on what they considered them to be, but a side that we were on, Regensburg, was Roman. So there were some remnants of the Roman construction from the 1st century AD, 2nd century AD, all up into modern times. They had microbreweries. They had one of the first stone bridges in Germany. It was built in 1211 from memory, and it's still in use today. And that sort of cemented it as an area for commerce. So it has a very rich history. And we went from there to Passau, was still just inside Germany, close to Austria. And as you're on the Danube, the river is actually divided so that you're partially on one side of the river in Germany and partially and the other side in Austria, even though the land on one side of the river might belong to one country. So we're going through the countryside, which is absolutely beautiful. In the German side, you see a lot of solar cells, a lot of windmills. They do a lot of electric generation. When you get to the Austrian side, some, but not as much. What you see more there is hydroelectric. Some of the locks that we visited were also used for hydroelectric power. And as you go down the river, you still see the river being low, but at least they were able to bring the boat. We actually went from east back to west to get to Passau. We put an east in there. Passau was the first place that we could travel to, but the area between Passau and Regensburg was not open. And when you're on ship, I mean, you got all kinds of fun on a cruise ship. Not a big cruise ship. It's different than it was when we went on the Carnival cruise ship, but you're only talking like 195 passengers. We're able to have a table for 10, no problem. They serve you local food, local beer. In a group fashion, you still choose from the menu which you want. It's more fine dining in a Viking cruise. You can certainly go up top of the ship and enjoy the beautiful sights as well. And chefs will come out making omelets and other foods, as well as kitchen. You can choose to eat in the main dining room or out open on the water. It's a very enjoyable time. And we've got to Salzburg, of course, that's the city for the Sound of Music. They arranged, for those of us, this was not on the cruise, this was an excursion some of us took when we were in Passau. And we got a chance to see some of the sites where the Sound of Music was filmed. They explained to us that the peak off in the distance where the opening scene was with Julie Andrews is actually 6,000 feet high, and she got right back to the Abbey in minutes. That obviously couldn't happen. They also said the other side was not Switzerland, it was still Germany, so if she escaped, she would have escaped back to Germany. But Hollywood being what it is, it's still based on a true story, and the music was beautiful. On the street, people would just start to break into song, and we were on the steps where Do Re Mi was filmed, and there were groups of visitors singing the song, and for lunch they had professional singers performing the songs for us in local outfits. And interesting that Salzburg is the home of Mozart and Doppler. I mean, maybe Mozart didn't live there his full life, but he was born and we got to visit his birth house. And the house he lived in as a teenager, granted, probably about 100 years separated from Doppler. But being that there's a Doppler shift, if you shift to the right from Mozart's childhood home, then you get to Doppler's home. So that's a right Doppler shift there, guys. It was only, I guess you could shift back the other way and have a Doppler shift in either direction, depending upon where you're walking. Of course, those of you that know anything about space science or satellites know what the Doppler shift is. And those of you in the medicine, you probably learned about the Doppler shift using an ambulance siren as an example. Like further. Any comments about Mozart or Doppler from any of the others here with us today? Anybody like to comment? Start on 20 meters, make your call, Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. Okay, anyone else from the trip that would like to comment about Stuart and Lannis? Were you went to Salzburg as well? Would you like to tell a little bit about what you experienced in Salzburg?
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. When we went to one of the locations for the filming of the motion picture, The Sound of Music, there were a group of maybe 24 people that spontaneously started singing one of the pieces from that motion picture. I just, it was that inspiring. Also, with regard to the famous people that you run into, I don't think we should forget to mention Beethoven. Beethoven was actually born and raised in the city of Bonn, Germany, which at one time was the capital of the obsolete country West Germany. And then as a youth, he relocated to Vienna because that was the sort of the musical capital. And then, as you know, he became deaf. And there's a famous piece by Beethoven called Ode to Joy, which is part of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. He composed all that symphony after he had become totally deaf. And then in modern times, Ode to Joy is currently the national anthem of the European Union. So you've got a national anthem that was written by a deaf person.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, Stuart, WA9 ZPO. And for those of you listening on 20 meters, we're talking about the Medical Amateur Radio Council DX trip to the International Radio Exhibition in Germany and the Viking cruise that we went on in association with it. It shows how amateur radio operators can get together, travel together, enjoy amateur radio together, but also make it family trips, DxVacations. And we encourage those of you that are interested to contact us. My home call is AA4FL. You can contact me through my QRZ page. But I'm gonna pause here one for any late check-ins, for any comments on the 20-meter side. Make your call to Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. I'm not copying anything right now. But we also had members well, potential members that came on. John W9NET is with us today. John, do you want to unmute and tell us a little bit about joining our group here, traveling with our group, and what it meant to you in your wife? If you just unmute here, John, so we'll get your audio going. They'll be turning over the mic.
Yeah, okay.
And
Testing 1, 2.
good.
Hello. You copy me okay?
Give
Yeah,
us
good afternoon to everyone. I can't even begin. More than 10 years ago, Stuart and I used to hang out at Dayton, and we had a conversation and thought that perhaps we would take a trip and go to Friedrichshafen. And this was maybe 11, 12 years ago. We thought about it. And so then as time got closer and closer, there was some kind of something political, whatever, terrorist, I don't know, in Europe or something like that. So it became obvious that it was probably best to avoid a trip there. So he said, well, how about we go to Tokyo? And I said, okay. And so we went to the Hamfest in Tokyo in 2016, I think it was. And took my wife and both my sons. And one of my sons is a ham, but not very active, and the other one is definitely not. But they were teenage, early 20s, that sort of thing. And it was the last time we had, and we'll ever have actually, a family get together with everybody, because none of the guys were married yet. And so I said, okay, guys, you're going to Japan. So we went to Japan and roughly spent 3 weeks there, and went to Akihabara and blah, blah, blah. It was really good. So it's been a while, and I got an email from Stuart. He said, let's go to Friedrichshafen. Now, Stuart is magic. And so when he speaks, I listen. So we got signed up, and my wife and I, the boys, are now married, and one of them has a 1-year-old daughter. So we had to leave them home. But my wife and I had an absolutely wonderful time, which is kind of unusual because, she's not exactly interested in ham radio. But she got to hang out with all the wives of you guys, of the guys that went on the trip. And she had an unbelievable time. It made me feel so good that she was happy. She had a really good time. And hanging out with the women, and going to see all that stuff, and going shopping and whatever. The Hamfest itself was fascinating because it was so clean, and it was inside for the most part, and everybody was pretty nice. What I did not see too very much of was QRP stuff. I saw a few places that were selling the end-fed half-wave antennas and such, but very little in the way of QRP. There was another guy, Hans Summers from QRP Labs, that was there. And so I had a little chat with him. He lives in Turkey, but he's got a British accent and so on and so forth. And he makes the QRP Labs equipment, which is really, really good. But it's QRP. And but other than that, I didn't see too much in the way of QRP. The flea market was very interesting. Uh, I'd never seen so much Drake equipment in my life, all together in one building. And I started out with a TR3 and still have it. And I still have one of just about every other Drake that exists. That's not astronomical in price. And so, as a Drake collector, it was great to see that. And then, just right down the aisle, not too far, was a bunch of Collins gear, and really, really high quality, good condition, all that sort of thing. So anyway, uh, the food in the Ham Fest was superb, and of course, in Europe, uh, you can drink as much beer as you can, uh, and nobody batted an eye. And there's good food and so on and so forth. And it was not that expensive either. The food. I mean, it was great. The prices for things was really not that expensive either, and I was surprised how low some of the gear, the prices were. But on the other hand, for me to take a piece of gear and put it in my suitcase and haul it back to the United States is probably not. It probably adds a certain amount of agony to the picture. But anyway, uh, there's one other thing. I was of the impression that those countries over there, they didn't want you taking a radio transmitter, so I didn't. And come to find out that nobody was looking, and I could have taken a QRP transceiver and strung up a wire or two at the top up in the boat or ship, and probably could have had some fun. Doing it legally might have been a little bit of a hassle, but that could have been handled too if I'd had some time. But anyway, next time I'm taking a transceiver, whether they say it's unless it's going to China or something like that. Which reminds me, I saw very, very little in the way of Chinese merchandise of any kind whatsoever. There's a little bit, but not very much, and I was really shocked because they make an awful lot of ham radio equipment, and a lot of it's pretty good quality too. So well, I was disappointed because that stuff is tiny and you can put it in your suitcase, but there wasn't anything to put in there. So that's pretty much my impression. There was good internet connectivity throughout the entire trip, and that was delightful. And the only thing negative, as far as I'm concerned, was that I took several taxi rides, and the guys, the taxi drivers, had a tendency to take the long way, so that they could add to they could pad the charge, and they sure did. And one guy actually shortchanged me 10 euros. I saw that and I didn't say anything. At the end, I said, "Well, I hope you make lots of money with your job, um, but I certainly do thank you for driving me around in this nice, clean taxi cab." And so I didn't hold it. I don't hold it against him. I mean, he was from an African country, and it's difficult. And these guys that come over learn the language, which he did. He spoke German and so forth. So anyway, that's pretty much a thumbnail sketch of my experience. And the only bad thing if you call it bad, was getting COVID, and it wasn't bad as the third time I've had it, and the first time was pretty bad. Uh, After that, it's just like getting a cold. But instead of going to California, I stayed here in Pennsylvania because the last thing I'd want to do would be infect my son or my granddaughter or his wife or any of that sort of thing. Okay, guys. So 73, nice to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to talking. So I'm going to put it on mute and make sure I don't suck this computer. Thank you, Jay.
Okay, that was W9NET. This is AA4FL Mike, operating out of Hawthorne, Florida. This is Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta for ID, the Medical Amateur Radio Council, Grand Rounds Mayor, Net, for ID purposes. Do we have any questions or comments on 20 meters? But we're still got a little bit of a net to go here. Appreciate those of you allowing us to have the frequency a little bit longer than we usually run. And make your call to Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. Okay, nothing heard. Harry, W1HMM, would you like to give your impression of the trip and perhaps how your spouse enjoyed it, being that she's not a ham, and this is how we structure our activities for the Medical Amateur Radio Council to make sure non-ham spouses have a great time as well. Turning over the mic to you, W1HMM, Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta.
Well, I think I can speak for Debbie that we both had a fantastic trip. I was a little unsure coming into this. I'd met Jay and Barry for about an hour at DxCation this year, but other than that, I had met nobody else except on Zoom. The group made us feel very comfortable. We enjoyed the trip immensely. It was nice traveling with everybody. I thought Friedrichshafen was smaller than I expected, but everybody was polite. There were some good exhibits, some interesting people to talk to. It was nice meeting hams from countries that we normally wouldn't see very much of at Hamcation or Xenia. Debbie had a great time painting in just about every place we went. And I got a lot of good memories, and I'm looking forward to the next trip. Other than that, that's really my impressions, having gotten back and gotten over COVID and had some time to think about it. Definitely looking forward to another trip.
Hey, thank you, Harry. W1HMM, Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta, and we'll start planning those other trips. There's an interesting comment, Harry, about meeting people from other countries normally we wouldn't meet, because one in particular that I could think of was a Romanian family staying at our hotel, and it would be tough to bring your family to Xenia. Probably wouldn't be enough for you to see Xenia to make it worth your while, other than amateur radio, which was far from the case here in Friedrichshafen because it's a tourist destination. And the little boy had a Florida Gator shirt on. So I asked him if he was, a Gator. And the family spoke enough English to explain to me that they had a relative that lived in Florida. That's why he had the Florida Gator shirt. We ran into a lot of people from the States, of course, on the trip, because these are frequently touristed. Once we started traveling on the Viking cruise and going to different countries, you meet people from all over, and your share of individuals from different colleges as well. And we appreciate you coming along, you and Debbie, Harriet, and hopefully we can select some future locations that not only allow for travel and long distances, but some get-togethers in the States, something to do in the New England area, some activity, contest, lighthouse. So anything you can think of, those of you here that are on today, we've got members with us today from various locations. We have a few from Chicagoland. We have some from the Gulf Coast of Florida. We have from New England. And you all have areas that are well worth visiting. Also, upstate New York. Niagara on the Lake would be a beautiful place to to visit. So if you come up with ideas that can tie an amateur radio activity to a vacation activity, that's a domestic DxCation. So that'd be enjoyable. On the trip, Salzburg, of course, we talked about, but the Milk Valley was the next stop. Milk, Austria is called the Wachau Valley. That's where we're talking about hydroelectric power. That's where they had a lock on the river, where they created hydroelectric. And if you look at a map of that area of Milk, Austria, you'll see where the river, when they created the locks, they also partially diverted the river so that they made recreational areas. And we took the opportunity, my wife and I, to do a bike ride. And bikes, e-bikes in Germany and in Austria are a little different than here. They're not motorcycles or motor scooters. They're assisted. The motors only kick in when you have to pedal. They only kick in to assist with the pedal. The first time I've been on e-bike, I found that to be enjoyable. My wife was sold on. In Vienna, of course, the music is Stuart mentioned, being that Mozart, Beethoven moved there because the music scene and the local music scene are fascinating. We did go. Many of us went up for an evening with the Vienna Resonant Orchestra. Got to hear the Blue Danube, of course. And when you walk around Vienna, being that it was previously the seat of the Austro-Hungarian Empire from the 1800s, you see vibrant artwork, statues, fascinating buildings. A lot of them, the buildings that were previously used when the empire was active, which of course World War One sort of ceased the empire as it previously existed. A lot of those buildings are now being used as museums. We didn't have enough time to do all the museums. You got this one side of the river, and the Danube was historical, and on the other side, they're starting to build the high-rise buildings. You see the Renaissance of sorts in both ways, the Renaissance of the past and the Renaissance of the current. We took the opportunity to go to, my wife and I, to Bratislava, Slovakia. I believe so did Lannis and Stewart. Beautiful city, right on the Danube, north side of the Danube. Interesting, you're looking at their big castle from the water on the boat. And the previous day you're in the castle looking down on the boat. 400,000 people in the area, probably more if you had college students and part-time residents. Might be in the mid 600s, 440,000 regular residences, and with the heat they had, they even had watering stations for the dogs. That was fascinating. We ended in Budapest, and we heard some of the discussion of Budapest. Many of us went to thermal baths. Historically, Budapest was famous for their thermal baths. Back in the Roman times, the Turkish Ottoman, the empire also had baths. Few of them, I believe, are still in use today from that era, but others have been built since, very ornate and enjoyable and inexpensive. I think it was John that mentioned some of the costs being less, but Budapest in particular, hotels and food was very inexpensive. Harder to fly out of there. A little more expensive to fly back. And paprika rules the world there. It's a lot of stores that feature paprika. But what a wonderful place to walk around and visit. And a very livable city. People know how to get out and enjoy. Doesn't seem to be like Spain or Italy where people are eating out at 10 or 11 at night. But there's certainly lots of cafes. Of course, Vienna, you had the coffee houses. It was an enjoyable trip. There's plenty to do. A typical Marco planning trip, and we try to plan activities for everyone. Thank you for those of you on the net here today on 20 meters, allowing us the open frequency. This is a CODA frequency as well. We predate it with our net and been on here for many years. We do appreciate allowing us the use of the frequency. And for those of you listening on YouTube, I hope you'll find it fascinating and check out Healthcare Hands as well and learn more about what we do as amateur radio operators, because amateur radio is a vibrant hobby. It's certainly not a dead one by any means. And stop the share here, guys. And we look forward to making a recording here.